All right, Cathy. Well, welcome. Thank you for being the guest speaker tonight for this for Holistic Well Care Advisors virtual meetup group. Um, we have a few people here who are interested in what you have to say tonight. So, without further ado, Cathy, take it away, Cathy.
All right. Thanks, Dan, for inviting me to participate. I'm really honored to be here, and welcome to everybody who's joining live or possibly listening in later on. I hope this is a valuable use of your time and you get some really valuable information from this. I am an Ayurvedic wellness counselor as well as a yoga teacher. I'll get into a little bit more about my background and qualifications here in just a moment. But the focus of what we're doing here tonight is talking about self-care as a form of healthcare, where we're building this foundation for our total well-being with natural and holistic approaches. So, what we will cover today is, first of all, taking a look at the Western approach to health and well being, which tends to have a more physical focus on food, exercise, BMI, that kind of thing. And then we're going to take a look at an Ayurvedic approach, which is a little bit more holistic. It's a little bit more preventative, not just with eating healthy and getting physical activity, but a lot of our other daily routines around food, sleep, activity, managing our energy, and just the things that we are exposed to, and allowing time for fortifying our bodies and minds and spirits, as well as just fueling them. And we'll take a look at some basics of Ayurveda, because by having that foundational information, it's going to help you understand a little bit better why some of these pretty simple self-care daily routines can really have a significant impact on our overall well-being over time. And then there's going to be a quiz that you can take to learn your primary dosha. We'll talk about the doshas, which is one of those Ayurvedic basics, the 5 elements which make up the 3 doshas, and then how we can build a self-care plan around those elements. And the primary dosha that we have when we are born is what you'll find from that quiz. That's your what we call your prakruti. And then from that point, we build our routines around supporting and pacifying that primary dosha. And then you can also look at self-care routines for when things get a little out of balance. So we want to keep the doshas in balance, which is a fine dance every day. We're trying to just keep balance and equilibrium throughout our physical, mental, and emotional being. So everything that we're doing here is focusing on that balance, that moderation, that stability point, and from there we can create optimal health and well-being. So just a brief introduction. I am a 200-hour registered yoga teacher with Yoga Alliance. I am also a meditation and breathwork guide. I have over 20 years of personal practice. I have been doing guided work with clients for a little over 2 years. And I have over 800 hours training in yoga, Ayurveda, acupressure, pranic healing, herbology, therapeutic yoga, and several other holistic modalities. And I put to be continued there because I'm constantly taking more trainings. I'm currently in another 300-hour yoga therapeutics training right now. And I love to learn. And I also feel like by building my skill set, that's just helping me to be able to serve my clients better. And as far as what I do with clients, basically, I'm a therapeutic yoga and wellness coach. So I incorporate yoga, breathwork, meditation, and other holistic modalities to provide a fully customized, what I call my prana program for my one-on-one clients. And if you want to know more about any of that, you can check out my website or you can send me an email. Either one of those is a great way to reach out to me. And disclaimer here, because I think it's really important to make sure that we talk about the fact that nothing presented in this workshop is to be interpreted as medical advice, and everything that's shared today is provided for informational and educational purposes only. So from there, let's move along. And we're going to take a look at the Western healthcare approach first, which we're all pretty familiar with. Eat healthy, exercise, pay attention to inputs and outputs, Many of us have either an Apple Watch or another kind of Fitbit, something like that. We keep track of our heart rate and our sleep. So we're doing more of those self-care type of things, keeping track of sleep and such, than we used to possibly. But with the Western approach, it's like, if you do these things and you do them well, then you should be healthy. And if you happen to get sick, then your doctor should know how to fix things. And that often requires a prescription medication or something more invasive if it's a more serious condition. But we often, with our Western approach, kind of are, going on about our business until we have a problem that is significant enough that we seek medical attention. And I do not want to discount the value of Western allopathic healthcare and medicine. It is top notch at treating serious illness and injury, as well as traumatic and emergency conditions. That is where Western medicine shines. And I have family members who are alive because of the interventions of Western medicine. So this is in no way any disrespect to the Western approach. But it isn't quite as focused on prevention and creating this foundation for health and longevity as the Ayurvedic approaches. So we're just looking at them as two different approaches. I find that some doctors are beginning to be more integrative in their methods, and I'm really happy to see that. I happen to have done a presentation last December on Ayurvedic pain management, and in the research found that the holistic wraparound approach to treating chronic pain is the statistics show repeatedly that a more holistic approach to treating illness and pain creates much better outcomes, and it generally is not only more efficacious, but the improvements are more rapid because we're approaching the illness or the pain from many different angles. So let's take a look here at the Ayurvedic approach. So our self-care routines are something that we do every single day, unless obviously life happens sometimes, but they're what we build our life around in order to provide this foundation for healthy living and longevity. And when I say daily habits, I really want to kind of focus on that, because sometimes people think of self-care as I'm going to go get a pedicure or a massage, or I'm going to take a long weekend. And there's certainly value in all of those things, but those are seen as a periodic treat for yourself. Or maybe you go get a manicure every month, but they're not something that you're doing every day to provide this routine foundation on which your health is being built. So these routines are focused on prevention by working to create balance within the different systems within your body, as well as your emotional and spiritual well-being. So it's more than just food and exercise, although those do play an important part. And this image on the right is of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. If you're familiar with Ayurveda, you know exactly what those are. Those are the three doshas. Within the Ayurvedic practitioner realm, when we are working with clients, each of our protocols is highly individualized based on your primary dosha, as well as your current condition, what stage of life you're in, even what season of the year it happens to be. So we're taking in a lot of information. If you decide to work with an Ayurvedic practitioner at any point, you will generally on an intake appointment have an hour and a half of just an interview and assessment, gathering a lot of information, because we look at not only where you are right now, but what has your life been like up to this point? Has there been any significant medical issue? Has there been any significant trauma? Where were you born and where were you brought up? We take into consideration a lot of different things. And there is a great focus on the three pillars of health within Ayurveda: food, sleep, and energy/activity management, because I look at those as kind of one thing. And sometimes when you talk about just energy, people think only, sleep and do I feel like I have energy, but our level of activity, both work and exercise and all the other things that we do really play into our energy levels. And we really have a great focus on digestive health in the Ayurvedic realm. So your digestion is often where imbalance first shows up. So even something as simple as burping after meals or your regularity, all of those things really play a factor in indicating how strong is your overall health. If your digestion is really good, generally your overall health is pretty good as well. And while we do take a look at, eating healthy, it's much more fine-tuned when you're working with an Ayurvedic recommendation on dietary choices, much more fine-tuned than the Western approach. And we don't look so much at diet as a trendy type paleo or, that type of thing. We're looking at what is good for you as an individual where you are right now. And yes, we talk about exercise, but we take a more gentle approach and a little bit more nuanced approach to what is best for you as an individual. Whereas oftentimes there's a Western approach of hard exercise is good exercise. That seems to sometimes be the philosophy. So we look at nurturing ourselves, not just pushing ourselves. And there's also much more focus on the daily choices, the daily lifestyle habits, and the life circumstances that figure into what we're going to do with someone and when we're developing a protocol. So I'm going to give you some basics of Ayurveda as we get going so that you've got a little bit of foundation, and these other things about this other information about your self-care routine is going to make a little more sense if you have some basic information. So within Ayurveda, we have the 5 elements that make up all of life: ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And those 5 elements make up the 3 doshas: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And you will have a primary dosha or a primary constitution that you are born with, and that stays with you the rest of your life. That's your primary dosha. And each of these doshas possesses the quality of those elements. So space and air are dry, mobile. The Pitta, fire and water, are spreading. Now, sometimes people say, how can fire and water be together? But the qualities of spreading, the Pitta has the heat and water brings the cool. So there's some balance there. And then Kapha has the water earth elements. So dense, heavy, immobile. So if someone is primarily Vata, they might be a very active person. They might change their mind a lot. Moving around isn't a big deal for them. They might talk really fast. And a person who is a Pitta person is usually very intense, like fire. They may be a bit of a, their belongings might kind of spread around the house a bit because they have a tendency to go into that spreading mode. And then they also, Pitta person generally is active, but in a more focused and determined way. And then a Kapha person is the person who really loves to relax. They always have a smile on their face. They're very grounded. So they have the qualities of water and earth. They may also have a tendency to have some edema and that kind of thing. So this is a very high level look at the doshas, but I want to give you that foundation to build on. So we do have all 3 doshas present within our systems. So we all have Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, but one of them is generally predominant. Occasionally there will be a person who's pretty even split. Tridoshic is pretty rare, but it does happen. And the primary dosha is where we tend to fall out of balance most easily because we have so much of those qualities in us already. So these qualities are also present in nature, in the seasons. We have the Vata season, the Kapha, and the Pitta season of the year. Summer is Pitta, so it is the season also when someone who is primarily Pitta may tend to fall out of balance as well, because nature has all of this pitta energy present. And we also find these qualities in our foods. Even the times of day have these different qualities to them. So I think I talked about the fact that we're born with our primary dosha, stays with us forever. That is our prakruti. And then if we have a current state of balance or imbalance, that is our vikruti. And our goal is to really keep these in balance as much as we can with all of our daily self-care. So everything we're doing, from our morning routine to how we have our meals, what foods we're eating, what is our activity level like, what is our evening routine like, what is our sleep hygiene like, all of those things figure into this and keeping that balance. So this Google Doc that I put in at the beginning here of the chat is a place where you can take notes on developing your own daily routine. But before we get to that, I'd like to also offer you the opportunity to take this dosha quiz. And let me see, it might already be in the chat here, but let me go ahead and try adding this. This will take you just a few minutes, and it will allow me to send you a PDF of recommendations that are specific for your primary dosha. And you can fill out this Google Doc. There is a space there to put in your email address, and I actually score these myself and send you the information on your primary dosha. So if you want to go ahead and take that quiz, go ahead and click on there, and it will look like this. I believe you can see dosha quiz from Cathy, and then you can scroll down and it's multiple choice. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to complete that, and then we'll come back together and move into this information about creating your very own self-care routine based on Ayurvedic principles. If anybody gets into the quiz too and has a question about the questions, certainly let me know.
Hmm.
Tell you what, as you complete the quiz, if you want to just put a little done in the chat, that way I'll know when everybody's finished.
So I have a question while
Yeah,
people are taking the quiz.
sure.
So I noticed the characteristics from the last slide, the earth, fire, water, and wind,
Mm-hmm.
almost the same as astrology signs that have different kind of, I guess, things that are assigned to them. Like I'm an Aquarius, so I think it's like a water bearer kind of sign. Is it almost similar to like astrology in a way, or is it taken, it is in the same family, or
Well, I will tell you, there is an entire part of Ayurveda that is Vedic astrology, which you may or may not have heard of. It is slightly different than astrology, I think, as most of us in the West know it. Again, it is really fine tuned to you as an individual. And the reason why is when you look at, say, the more Western approach to astrology, it's like, so when does your birthday fall between this date and this date? Okay, then you're a this.
right?
Within Vedic astrology, you actually look at where you were born on the planet, what time of day you were born, and where the planets were in the sky at the time of your birth, and where they were in relation to where you were born. And that is what determines your astrological sign. Vedic astrology is also known by the term of Jyotish. I have this much knowledge on Vedic astrology, um, and I'm learning more about it. But it is an entire realm of information. But kind of along the lines of what you're asking, yes, your dosha and your Vedic astrological chart are going to have connections there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. We're almost all complete here. And again, I'm giving you really high level information as far as the basics of Ayurveda, but it's a really good starting point for us to build upon for these self-care routines. And if you happen to go to work with an Ayurvedic practitioner too, you're going to get super specific, very fine-tuned recommendations on other things that you can include. I'm doing some very basic ones that they're beneficial to everyone, regardless of your prakriti or your vikruti. If you get into things like abhyanga, which is a daily self massage with oil, you would be given information on which herbal oils to use to address your current vikruti, because certain ones will be good for certain types of conditions as well as the season of the year and that kind of thing. All right, everybody's all finished up with that. So I will get that information to you guys tomorrow. You should receive your recommendations, and it will have things in there about dietary choices, daily routines, and I'm trying to think the other things that are in there. Some basics on yoga and breath work that you can do to support your primary constitution, your primary dosha. So next, if you grab that Google Doc that was up at the top of the chat, you can use that to take some of the recommendations that I'm giving here and plug them in to what you would like to try for your own daily self-care routine. If you'd like to introduce some new things, I always encourage people to take a slow approach if you're trying to change any habits or you're trying to introduce something new into your daily routines, because trying to do a lot of things all at once is just overwhelming and creates more stress. And that's absolutely not what we're going for. We're going for allowing for much more balance and reducing stress. So I say start slow. And also consider that when we're talking about habits around our meals and activities and all these different kinds of things, I like to take the 4 out of 7 days approach, because there are things that you're going to be told to avoid Well, we can't go probably our entire modern lives and never eat fast food. So while we want to avoid that, we certainly don't want to get stressed about the fact that, hey, we're on a road trip and we're going to stop and grab something at Chick-fil-A or Wendy's or whatever. So keep in mind that 4 out of 7 days, like 4 out of 7 days, I'm going to try to make sure that I do a daily meditation, or 4 out of 7 days, I'm going to make sure that I prepare all my meals fresh and then, or eat freshly prepared meals out. 4 out of 7 days, I'm going to not eat leftover food, that type of thing, because we don't want to beat ourselves up by trying to be perfect. That's just, it is not the, that is not what we're going for, is perfection. We're going for balance, so, and moderation. So I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I find sometimes that people are like, I want to do it all and I want to do it now, and I want to do it just right. And that can just be really overwhelming. So dinacharya is the Sanskrit term for this daily routine, especially focused on the morning as dinacharya. There is a different term for the evening routine, but overall, we're going to just focus on that term for daily routine. But your daily routine starts from the moment you wake up. So how are you waking up? Are you waking up naturally, or are you using an alarm? Even things as simple as that. When we get into a really good sleep routine, we should be able to just wake up naturally and feel rested and not need an alarm. We want to express some gratitude within the first few moments of waking. That can be gratitude for just, I have a new fresh day ahead of me, or I'm glad that my partner is here with me, or I'm glad I have this thing to look forward to today. Something simple. I'm glad it's sunny today and not rainy, whatever the case may be. And then we get into our brushing of our teeth and clearing the stagnation from overnight, and our preparation for the day. And then we take a look at our daily activity. So not only our work life, but what are we doing to get exercise? Are we sedentary for part of the day? Do we need to get up and move around a bit more? What are our interactions like with other people? What kind of media are we bringing into our lives? What are we being exposed to? All of those things have to be digested, not just our food, but everything that we have as a sensory input has to be processed through our systems in order to allow the junk out and keep what is good and healthy. We want to take a look at our food habits. Do we have consistent meal times, or are we kind of all over the place? If you happen to be a Vata personality, sometimes you might forget to eat. Your meal times might be all over the place, and so you might have to put a little more effort into those consistent meal times. Those are really helpful for your digestive health, because your body naturally knows when to be hungry and when you're going to be feeding it and when to be ready for digestion. So we like to keep the meal times pretty standard throughout every week, each day of the week. What types of food are you eating? Are they seasonal? Are they appropriate for your current condition? Are you eating fresh foods, freshly prepared foods? What is your environment like? Is it chaos? Are you watching television or reading a book, or are you really focused on your meal and the people you might be eating with? And then also every day we need to have some rest and rejuvenation, and we need to plan for that. Yoga Nidra is a wonderful thing to include in your day for many reasons, which I'll get into. A daily meditation of whatever type works for you really has a lot of benefits that we'll get into also. But what kind of entertainment, what kind of social time, all of these things that quite often, if you, especially if you happen to have that Pitta personality, you might be someone who really focuses on your work and might forget to plan for this downtime and this rejuvenation. So let's take a look at some of these morning routines. Waking early during the Vata time of day before or near sunrise really helps you to set the day up right for having optimal energy. After the Vata period comes Kapha, and as you remember, Kapha is heavy and dense. If we sleep in too much, it is harder to wake, and then we tend to be more sluggish throughout the day. This is something that people may have to really work at if they're in a different type of sleep pattern. but it is well worth it. Between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., the adrenals are being rejuvenated and recharged. They're allowed to relax. That is the optimal window for adrenal rejuvenation. And also, it is when the body is producing the most melatonin. And then from about 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., the cellular rejuvenation and repair, all of those kinds of things that allow the body to just repair itself, is most active. So, being asleep, if you're a night owl, I would encourage you to try to adjust a little bit so that you can get into those optimum times for just allowing your body to heal itself, because that provides you a really good foundation for your overall health and well being. We talked about gratitude first thing in the morning. Something that, if you're not familiar with tongue scraping, this is a very gentle scraping of the tongue. It's not like really pulling and scratching the tongue. So there is a stainless steel tool that's great for all three doshas. And you're just gently removing some of that coating that builds up on the tongue overnight. It can be food that just doesn't completely digest, so that creates a little bit of what we call ama. It is over time toxic to our digestive system. It also helps to get rid of some of the dead bacteria. We're just removing that coating and then also stimulating our digestive system at the same time. So again, it's very gentle. You just pull that little scraper over the tongue a few times, rinse it off. Some people do it 5 or 6 times. Some people may do it 7 to 10. Just depends on what you're most comfortable with. But it's a gentle way to rid the mouth of some of that ama and also help digestion get going in the morning. And oil pulling is traditionally done with sesame oil. Some folks will do coconut oil or something else if they don't like the flavor of a sesame oil. It's really good for the gums and teeth. It can also help to draw out some toxins, and it gives you some exercise for the muscles of the face that we don't often give a workout to. And as we age, some of us are a little more conscious of needing to do that. You do need to make sure to, as you're swishing this oil or pulling it through the teeth across the gums, make sure that you're not swallowing that oil. I've seen something online that said something about, we want to get rid of it. It's pulling toxins out. So we want to spit that in the trash, not down your kitchen sink, because it can cause problems with your plumbing. And this eye circling is just physically moving the eyes around while you keep the nose straight forward. This is great, especially for those of us that spend a lot of time at a computer screen. If we wear glasses, it's very helpful. We're just exercising those muscles around the eyes and the eye sockets. And then having a cup of warm water in the morning really helps to get your digestive system primed, flowing, to produce that morning bowel movement, which is another indication of healthy digestion. Having an easy, pretty much like clockwork bowel movement in the morning. If for those of you who are interested, the most healthy looking stool is banana shaped, medium brown in color. It doesn't have a super overpowering odor, but it has an odor. It doesn't have any cracks in it. It's well formed and it floats. All of those things are indications that your digestive health is really strong. If you have an imbalance in your digestion, it's your body saying, hey, I need you to pay some attention and figure out what's going on. That is our first indication that things are getting out of balance, usually is within the digestive system. And a practitioner can give you many different ways to help bring that back into balance. There are some gentle teas that you can make that help often to bring it right back into balance. And generally, if we've eaten some food that we maybe shouldn't have had, or we've been stressed, or we haven't hydrated properly, we'll see that. And then we can get that back in balance pretty easily by just adjusting our habits or our intake. If you see that you're having digestive symptoms that are prolonged, that's when you want to seek out some advice, some input about what can I do to get this back on track, because continuous digestive problems, about 85% of serious illness, we start to see indications of a problem in the digestive system. If we can get it under control before it moves outside the digestive system, we have much better outcomes and we can prevent more serious disease. So let's take a look at daily activity and energy management. These are just some questions for you to think about. What is your exercise like? I mean, we all have different levels, different capabilities. You know, I have some clients who are dealing with chronic pain or chronic illness. They might have an autoimmune condition. I have one client who's in a wheelchair. So what you're capable of and what your limitations are really vary. So you need to be incorporating exercise that is both energizing, rejuvenating, and appropriate. Is it gentle enough for you and also strengthening, or are you going so far that it is depleting? Just some things to consider. Do you walk a little bit after each meal, or do you go hang out on the couch? If you can take 100 steps after each meal, that's a huge benefit to your digestive system. And it doesn't have to be outside. It can just be, you know, walking around the house. Maybe you're tidying up. And what is your work schedule like? Are you chronically stressed? I have a couple clients who are just, that's their main thing. They're very high achieving, they're very successful at work, but that has come with stress that is now affecting their well-being. So we are working on ways to manage that naturally. Are you overworking? Are you happy with your work situation? You know, is it an environment that's building you up, or is it causing you to have stress and depletion? And also remember to look at what you're doing in all of these different areas at what you're already doing well. I know we're very much focused on talking about improving things, but a lot of times we need to take a moment to recognize what are we doing really well that is already setting us up for success. Yoga Nidra, I think I mentioned earlier, is a great transition between work and home time, especially if you work at home and your work is always there. It is often done as a guided meditation. I use the Insight Timer app for guided meditations. I've been using it for many years. I've contributed a little bit to it, but very few. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, of meditation teachers, as well as other types of holistic providers on that app. You can search through and find whatever type of meditation you might want, as well as just a simple timer if you want to just have silent meditation. I highly recommend the Insight Timer app. And this Yoga Nidra is not moving at all. It is what some people call dynamic rest. You are fully awake, but you are in a deep, deep relaxation. So generally, if you do have one of the Fitbits or Apple Watch or something like that, you will notice there is a dip in your heart rate, and it will help you also in the evening. If you have difficulty transitioning to sleep, this can be a great way to transition into sleep. If you are really depleted and super tired, you might fall asleep even at midday doing this. But the idea is to have this deep relaxation, but still have full awareness. It is really helpful for my clients who are working with autoimmune issues because it's a really good nervous system rebalancer. And a big part often of autoimmunity is that the nervous system is just so overreactive, and it really helps to bring that back down and into control. Just think about, as you're looking at your daily activity and wanting to manage your energy levels, what might be depleting you and what is building you up, so that you can include more of what's fortifying you and find ways to, if you can, move out those things that are depleting you, or have a strategy for when you've done something depleting. What am I going to do now? Am I going to take 5 minutes and do some breath work to bring me back into equilibrium before I move on to the next thing? Have a strategy for bringing yourself back to a more balanced state. And do remember, like, we have to digest all those sensory inputs, not just our food. Not sure why there's a question mark there, but that is not a question. That is a statement. So let's take a look at food habits. But before we do that, I'm throwing a lot of information at you. Does anybody have any questions right now before we move into food? All right, all good. So, if you are working with an Ayurvedic practitioner, your dietary recommendations are going to be fine tuned to you as an individual. But overall, from an Ayurvedic perspective, we want to eat fresh foods that are seasonal, and we want to eat mostly cooked foods. If you're going to eat raw foods, make sure that's in the middle of the day when your digestion is at its peak. When the sun is highest in the sky, that's the warmest part of the day. That is the peak of digestion. It's the peak of pitta. That is the pitta time of day. So between around 11 and 2, that period in there. Also, that's a great time to eat your most substantial meal. I personally grew up eating a more substantial meal for dinner, so this was a big shift for me, but it also allows you to sleep better if you have a little bit lighter meal in the evening and have your bigger meal midday. Mostly cooked foods. We want to avoid leftovers, fast food, junk, highly processed foods, alcohol, frozen meals. All of these things are not really healthy for our digestion. Do I consume some of these things? Absolutely. I think many of us do. We just want to make those less of what we consume and more of what we consume, these really healthy foods. And cold foods are just, they slow down your digestive system. Digestion runs on heat and the digestive fire. So when we bring cold foods or cold beverages into the meal, that slows down our digestive system. So just keep that in mind. Now it's the middle of summer. Do you want to have a cold glass of lemonade now and then, or you want to have some ice cream? Of course. We just want those to be not the norm. They're just an occasional thing. We also want to be calm when we're eating our food and when we're preparing our food. The energy that we have as we're preparing the food, that's infused into the environment, infused into the food. And we want to be focused on the meal rather than TV or what's going on outside or reading a book. I happen to live on my own, so my habit is to look at my food, think about the textures, the colors, really tasting the flavors. So really focusing on the gratitude behind who did what to bring me this meal. I'm so grateful to the farmers and to the animals that gave their life for any meats that I'm eating, and to the people who work at the grocery. You can really make it a gratitude practice also when you're eating your meals. If you happen to be a person who hurries through their meals, I encourage you to slow down. That is also much healthier for digestion. You want to chew enough so that the food has been prepared for the stomach and it's mushy and soft before you swallow it down. When you think about the fullness and what you want to kind of work toward, obviously really feeling extra full at the end of a meal, we'll do that now and then if we're having a celebration or something. But we want to aim for about half of the stomach has food, about a quarter of it is beverage or water or whatever we might be drinking. And then we want to leave about a quarter of the space for the digestive process to happen. We need to have some space there for the digestive juices to cover all the foods, for the muscle of the stomach to work. All of those things are optimal if we leave a little space. And we want to limit our intake of a lot of liquid during a meal. A small glass of room temperature water is best for mealtime because it's not cold. It's not going to slow down our digestion. And it is allowing most of our stomach to be full of the food, which is what needs most of the stomach's attention. Soups and stews for dinner are really great because they're helping you stay hydrated overnight, and they're also going to be a little easier to digest before you have to go to bed. Another recommendation on that is to finish your meals and all of your eating for the day by 7 p.m. You'll get a much better night's sleep that way because active digestion has passed by the time you hit the pillow, and then your body can focus all of its energy on rejuvenation and sleeping rather than trying to digest the remainder of your food. And if you do happen to eat leftovers, sprinkle some black pepper on there. It helps to prevent any ama buildup and just makes it a little bit easier for the digestive system. So let's take a minute to talk about the daily rest and rejuvenation. I encourage you to plan it so it happens, especially if you tend to not plan these things in and you're very focused on your productivity. You need to plan these things into your calendar because otherwise they often won't happen, and they're super important to your well-being. We talked about yoga nidra. There are many physical, mental, and emotional benefits. If you want to look into that more, there's tons of research on yoga nidra, so it is available readily online. I really believe in a daily meditation. It is something that has made a tremendous difference in my life personally, especially when you're going through difficulties. It just allows you to bring your senses inward. It allows you to detach a little bit from everything that's going on around you so that you can be more focused and grounded and really go out into the world to navigate whatever's going on from a really settled, centered place. If you're new to meditation, I encourage you to try Insight Timer. I also have some free guided audio meditations on my website that you can access there under the resources tab. I can't say enough good things about finding what works for you. There are many different types of meditation, and finding the right one is what's really, really important. It can be even a moving meditation or a walking meditation if sitting still just isn't your cup of tea, and then you can work your way toward other types. Breath work, there's a tremendous amount of research also about breath work and how it helps with stress management, anxiety management, pain relief, improved digestion. Again, a very simple habit to incorporate and to learn with the payoffs are huge for all of these things. Minor changes, minor habits that seem maybe not that significant, over time, they have cumulative benefits. And then your nighttime and sleep routine. I think everybody knows, just be screen free an hour before bed and it will help your sleep so very much. Legs up the wall is it's exactly what it says. You put your legs up the wall, your body here, your legs up the wall. I do this in my bed at night, so my legs are actually up against the headboard. And it's really great for helping with varicose veins. It helps with cueing your nervous system to calm down so you can prepare for sleep. And then there are some marma points, which we may not have time to get into. There are marma points all over the body. If you want to touch the center of your forehead, just inside your eyebrows, just below both eyes, right on either side of the nostril, right below the nose, at the center of the chin where the indentation begins, right beneath the collarbones, and then right at the center of the sternum. I did that very quickly, but if you hold and count to 30 while you're doing each of those, and just allow yourself to really focus on that touch, it's a really great way to calm you down before you go to bed at night. It takes just a few minutes. I do the marma points while I have legs up the wall. And then the 10 p.m. bedtime has a lot of benefits that we've already talked about. So let's review briefly this idea that self-care is kind of DIY healthcare. Really helps to build this foundation for optimal health and well-being. And it really cues you in to pay attention to your body and the messages that it's giving you, whether that be digestive upset, pain, a headache, feeling lethargic or really tired. Throughout every day, our body's giving us these messages. And quite often, we tend to push them aside because we have a to-do list and we don't get back to taking care of ourselves the way that we should in order to have the best health. So I encourage you to really listen to those messages that your body's giving you and become a little more in tune with them. Just bring yourself into your body, fully embody your being, and take notice, because as a culture, we tend to push through and focus on productivity, completing the to-do list, all of those things. And if we are able to bring some attention back to taking really good care of ourselves, I feel like that is honestly one of the most important jobs that we have in this lifetime, is taking really good care of ourselves. It will help us be healthier. It will help us show up better for the people that we love and care about. It will actually help us be more productive because we're allowing ourselves time to rejuvenate, and because we can come to our work fully healthy, full of energy, well rested, with enough fuel for the day. So the benefits are there. It's just a matter of incorporating these things on a schedule that you can. When I had 3 young children, my routine was much different. Now I'm an empty nester, and I can focus more on having an hour-long yoga practice in the morning just because I want to. So take into consideration your state of life, your age, your circumstances when you're planning all these things too. And just be realistic and congratulate yourselves when you do the things that you've set out to do. Focus on what's working and start slow to add in new things. And focus on those 3 pillars of health: food, sleep, energy, and activity. Choose habits that you can stick with. If tongue scraping is something you think is going to not work well for you, maybe don't try that. Maybe just try incorporating that cup of warm water in the morning. One little thing at a time. I encourage new clients often to either pick 3 things you want to do just in the food category, or pick 1 thing in the food category, 1 in the sleep hygiene, 1 in your energy management. Just focus on those 3 things at a time. And if you find that's too much, go back to 1. It isn't about doing all the things all at once. It's about slow and steady progress. And just remember that this preventative approach really focuses on preventing illness and increasing your longevity. So those are the benefits that you're getting from this. And again, listen to how your body responds to any of these things. If it's giving you negative feedback, then take that and go with it and adjust so that you can do something that's going to bring you back into balance. Because while we all have common needs of sleep, food, all of that, we each have our own way of going about getting those needs met that's most appropriate for us. So your digestion, energy, mood, all good indicators of where you are, how balanced you are, and how healthy you are overall. So if you would like to get more information or schedule a free 30-minute consultation to talk about some of these things and how they might come to play in your life, I'm happy to set something up with you. You can reach out to me at either one of my email, or take a visit to my website, and I would be happy to set up a chat with you after you get the information about your dosha recommendations. If you want to clock a little time and talk about that a little more, I'd be happy to do that also. And if anybody has any questions, I would be happy to provide some answers, or certainly try to. Deanna?
Yeah. Hi, Cathy. Thanks for all the information. The question I had is, what are your thoughts around intermittent fasting?
So intermittent fasting, as I understand it, is a window of about 12 hours, right? Is that how you understand it?
Yeah, I think somewhere between 12 or sometimes 16 hours.
Okay. So from the Ayurvedic perspective, if you're finishing your dinner at 7, and you're not eating your breakfast again until 7, 8:30, somewhere in there, then you will have done that 12-hour fast. So while we don't necessarily talk about it as a standalone thing, if you're following the Ayurvedic protocol of completing all your food for the day by 7 and you don't have your breakfast before 7, you will have done that.
Okay. Thank you.
And I will say, just to tack on to that, sometimes if you have worked with a practitioner, they might actually indicate that a good protocol for you might be a longer fast. Maybe once or twice a week, you don't have a breakfast. And that would only be for certain situations. So I don't want to say that that's for everyone, but and I can't even, I'm not going to go into naming conditions or anything either, because I don't want to go there. I don't think that's appropriate to go there. But there are certain times when a little bit longer fast might be a protocol for someone with a particular condition or symptom.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I got a question, Cathy. Great presentation. I got a lot of notes. I appreciate that. Two questions, really. One, me and my wife just started doing OMAD, 1 meal a day. I just want your philosophy, your opinion on that. And what was the other one? And the Ayurvedic philosophy, excuse me, on red meat, like steak.
Okay, yeah. So let me write that down so I don't forget meat. So I'm not familiar with, you said it's called OMED, the 1 meal a day?
OMAD, yes. Yeah, 1 meal a day. We eat, just once. One big meal, all your calories at once. We've been doing it for about 4 or 5 days now. I've lost maybe 2 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm loving it. I figured it's easier to eat like a Viking once than try to peck around and count my calories all day. Especially for the way I like to eat, I like to gorge myself and then take a nap if I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, just please your opinion.
So it's because Ayurveda is very individualized. No one diet really suits every person. So, for instance, if you happened to be a Pitta individual, eating 1 meal a day would just not do it for you, because Pittas have fast digestion. And so that 1 meal a day is not going to be enough for them. They need to have a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, maybe a fruit in the afternoon or something like that, because their digestive fire is fast. They digest quickly, they need more fuel, and they don't have a problem with eating those meals and maintaining a pretty, as long as they're healthy and balanced, a pretty stable weight, because their digestion is like clockwork. They just digest quickly. So my thoughts are, doing something like what you're doing with a goal in mind to maybe drop a certain number of pounds or something on a short-term basis, I can see it being beneficial. I think that long term it could be detrimental, because the body needs to have more consistent, like blood sugar, more consistent fuel. Some people will end up with a headache if they only eat once a day. And that's an indication, like, and that's not going to work. That's a Vata type of situation. So I'm not saying what you're doing is bad or wrong. I can see the benefits, and you mentioned the benefits to you. And you also you mentioned your tendency to eat a big meal and then feel really full and want to take it easy. So I haven't seen your dosha quiz yet, but that is kind of a kapha tendency, put it that way. So I'm not going to say don't ever do that. Do what's working for you, but my professional opinion would be, as a long-term thing, I can see that could be depleting and could have some unintended consequences. How about that? But yeah, I can see where, as a short-term type of thing, if it's something that you're trying to do to lose some weight, then you would want to find out, so if I'm not going to do this long term, what am I going to do differently after this period of time, after I reach this goal? How am I going to focus on staying balanced after that? So that is where someone could, with an Ayurvedic perspective, could come in and say, well, let's take a look at all these different things. And then from here on out, we can say, oh, these are the types of foods that would really be supportive of you and your constitution and your current situation, so that you don't put weight back on, if that makes sense. And then as far as meat is concerned, Ayurveda does not say that you have to eat a vegetarian diet. There are many, because Ayurveda is rooted in the ancient Indian culture. And I don't think I mentioned this, but yoga as a Western concept is often just seen as a type of exercise, but it is actually a portion of Ayurveda, and it is a part of a overall Ayurvedic lifestyle, healthy lifestyle. But a lot of people of Indian descent don't eat meat, but that is not an Ayurvedic directive of any kind. And certain doshas will respond better if they do keep meat in their diet. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Anybody else have questions?
Actually, yeah, one more. I'm learning Tai Chi and Qigong at the moment. How
Oh,
does that
awesome.
compare to your philosophy? Because I believe in balance. I believe in hard, soft. I do push-ups and Tai Chi, so I try to balance that.
Yeah.
Um, just are there anything that you can tell us about how those two kind of compare?
Well, I will tell you that the Eastern philosophies of both like traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, a lot of overlap. So Tai Chi and other Eastern physical activities, I think also have a lot of the same philosophy, a lot of overlap. So the Ayurvedic yoga, which is different, yoga is not all the same. There are many different schools of yoga, and you can go to one studio and have 6 different teachers, and they all are coming from a different place. So I will say that I approach yoga from an Ayurvedic perspective, and we are working on building strength, flexibility, mobility, and also nurturing the body rather than just working it out. So I think that from what I understand, and I've only done Tai Chi a couple times and I've done Qigong as well, that is again focused on energy flow, strength and flexibility, drawing the senses inward so that you're really focused on your body, your movement, you're fully embodied and focused. So that's bringing the mind aspect into it also. So I think there's probably a lot of overlap there if I'm describing it as you would agree.
From my experience, yes. In Tai Chi, Qigong, the main thing is relaxation, focusing on while you're moving where the tension is and trying to actively relax that.
Right.
Standing in a certain way where you don't need to use muscle tension to keep yourself up. My teacher blows my mind with this because he's in his 60s. I'm 34. And I call him Red Bull because he gives me wings. He just tosses me around like I'm nothing.
Yeah.
And I got a background in combat, so does he. But he showed me this push hands technique where he's literally pushing on me as hard as you can. And the way you focus and center yourself, the more you relax, the less you have to do to fight back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's mind boggling to me because I'm a former weightlifter, so I'm still trying to switch over to the relaxing calmness is the power thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no,
And I think
that's about right. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, I'm sorry I interrupted. I think that the another couple key points that you mentioned with Ayurvedic yoga, there's effort to get into a pose and then you relax into that pose. And so if you feel a lot of tension or if you're starting to hold your breath, then you know you need to just back up a little bit so you can breathe easily, deeply and fully. And that's the other piece that actually is very prominent and plays a really big role in Ayurvedic yoga is that you are moving with your breath. When you are expanding the body, you're inhaling. When you're contracting the body or bending a certain, you're bending over, you are exhaling. So the movement with the breath is really important. And like you said, it's a mental, physical, emotional experience. You're bringing all those things into play.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anything else? Are we ready to wrap up, Dan?
Yeah, I just have one quick question about digestion.
Mm-hmm.
On one of the slides, you talked about adding like black pepper
Yes.
to leftovers. Um, I use apple cider vinegar. Like
Mm-hmm.
I like to I guess, do a cheat for carbs. So I don't, my big thing, and maybe Robert, this is something that, when you decide to come off of that diet that you're doing, is really to pay attention to the glycemic index of foods, because that's really an important thing where your insulin gets spiked. And one of the hacks that I've read about through pub, and another thing that, like just another thing I mention when I coach people, is to, if you're going to do your scientific research on things, go to like legitimate sources like pubmed.com, where they list these scientific papers. So, one of the things that I read about apple cider vinegar is that if you take some apple cider vinegar prior to having carbs that spike your insulin, it actually reduces that spike by over 50%. But I'd also, you have to, I guess, be careful. I do it because I tend to have a slower digestion. So, for certain foods, like if I eat meat, I tend to, and if I'm eating it later, I'll take a swig of apple cider vinegar to help with the process of digestion. I'm just wondering, is there anything else that you would suggest besides, maybe pepper or apple cider vinegar, or something else that, and maybe I might be harming myself, and you might know something about apple cider vinegar that maybe is not good for someone like myself.
So I do have a question for you.
Okay.
Are you diluting this vinegar or are you taking it straight?
I put water in it
Okay, good.
into the
Because
into
it's very acidic and you can cause some damage in your, esophagus and everything. I'm glad to hear you're diluting it. So, because I
yeah.
occasionally I'll have somebody will say, I just took a swig, and I'm like, it does need to be diluted. So glad you're doing that.
Yeah.
And that you pointed out too that you have a tendency toward a little slower digestion, because if you happen to be a pitta individual, you are more likely to have acidity anyway because of that fast digestion. There's always a lot of activity in the digestive tract of someone who's primarily pitta. So I would suggest, if that were you, I would say probably don't do that every day. And pay attention to your body. If it's very adjusted to that, it may be fine for you. But again, you just really need to listen to your body. But as a general rule, if I were working with a pitta individual, I would say probably not. The black pepper is to help with some of the, I can't really describe it, but we call it ama. It's just leftover food begins to decompose. It just does. The refrigeration slows that process down, but it is optimally nutritious right after it's prepared. I eat leftovers too. I just try to eat everything within 24 hours. That's kind of my rule. If I can't consume it within 24 hours, I try not to eat it. I'm like, yep, that needs to go. That has not always been my habit, but since I have learned more, that's what I've decided is best for my health. And then you asked about other things to help with the digestion. There is CCFT, which is coriander, cumin, and fennel seeds, whole seeds. You can just buy them at the bulk store and mix them up in a mason jar, and use a tablespoon of that in some boiling water to make a tea or an infusion, and have that first thing in the morning, because the cumin, coriander, fennel are all really good for digestive balance, no matter what your dosha is. So that is a digestive tea. That's another suggestion. I'm trying to think other things too. Ginger tea, fresh ginger tea is also another great thing. So even if you were to mix it up and maybe do ginger tea one morning, CCFT another morning, maybe just hot water. If you want to try to do that, you could also do warm water with a squeeze of lemon juice, a little Himalayan pink salt. That's another good, get the digestion going in the morning, kind of alkaline. It makes the water alkaline. I can't.
Yeah.
So those are a few suggestions that would be beneficial. The CCFT I especially like because it's tridoshic, so it will suit everyone.
One more question.
Yeah.
We talked about, being regular. What if you're regular, but the stool is very hard, and it's an issue that sometimes I have, and I think it may be, I mean, I drink coffee, right, in the morning, and I may have a couple of those cups of coffee, and I know that could take the water out of your system, so to speak. So I try to actually have like a glass of water, or 16-ounce bottle of water, and I pour like a Dr. Berg's, like rehydration that has like potassium, sodium, and magnesium
Mm-hmm.
to help with that. And I noticed that it does help. But sometimes it doesn't. I'm just wondering, I don't want to take like a stool softener. I don't know
Right.
how, if that's something that is even good to do. But is there anything else that you could recommend, that besides maybe just drinking more water or something? Maybe there's a food or.
Well, I was going to say your overall hydration throughout the day can help. You also can try to have, and I think I mentioned this, having for dinner rather than maybe a meat, a vegetable, a rice or a starch or something, having a stew or a soup along with something lighter, because those are just going to digest more quickly. And also over the course of the night, the liquid in that food is going to help keep you hydrated also.
Okay.
So that's another idea. I'm thinking on the fly here. You want to make sure that your fiber intake is good. And you might try, I'm trying to think also, like really quickly off the top of my head. You were already talking about like starchy foods and that kind of thing. It's hard, I'll be honest, to give you a quick yes, this will work for you, because from an Ayurvedic perspective, I need to know more. Like, how long has this been going on? Does it happen every
Right.
day? Has it been
Right.
happening for 3 years? We really take a much more comprehensive look.
Got
Uh,
it.
but that being said, that is an indication that you do want to incorporate more hydration. I think if you're doing that, the magnesium in the evening, because it helps to relax the muscles also. So overnight, that can be relaxing the muscles, because sometimes it can be a muscular, digestive system type situation too. There is there's actually a series of, because you do want the stool itself to be soft. So you do want to look at your food intake and look at fiber, look at liquidity in that evening meal, look at the types of vegetables, types of fruits that you're eating, because some of them are, for instance, lemons versus limes. This is not the exact thing we're talking about. Lemons they're heating in nature. Limes are cooling in nature. Two citrus fruits, you would probably think they would be the same, but lemon is actually heating for the body while lime is cooling. So the energetics of foods, when you get your dosha quiz PDF, there will be some things on there based on your primary dosha that says these are the most supportive foods. Avoid these types of things because they're drying. Ginger, fresh ginger, much better for you than dry ginger. Dry ginger is really drying and heating for the body. So you want to do things that are increasing the water element, increasing the fire element, and I'm trying to think what other things I could suggest. Sorry, I'm racking my brain. I
That's all
hope that
right.
that's somewhat helpful.
Oh, absolutely.
But
100%.
it definitely is. It's good that you recognize it as something that needs some adjustment. And often it's just a matter of looking at also, I know what I was going to say. That took me back. There is a series of yoga moves that you can do each morning. If you happen to get to the point where it leads to constipation and difficulty going, This is a series of movements that stretch the front body. There are some twists, and then also like a yogic squat, which we call malasana. Malas are the body's wastes, so that squat helps to get the body in a position where the muscles allow for the elimination of waste. So, and I know that's on YouTube. I didn't make it, but it's very helpful. I've used it myself. And you also, during the course of doing the movements, you have some really warm water that you're drinking, and it works pretty well, I have to say.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome. Anything else before we wrap up?
All right. Well, thank you, Cathy, for this very informative meetup. I know you gave us a pretty high overview of this, so I'd love to have you back. Maybe we could do a more in-depth, go a little deeper into the practice of Ayurveda or whatever else you want to share with us, since you are multi-talented.
Well,
And
thank you.
yeah. And yeah, so thank you everybody for joining. I'll have this video available tomorrow, and I'll be putting it in the actual meetup, and I'll send you a link as well, Cathy, so you could have that. And with that, I think we have another meetup next week. So please be sure to go and look on the meetup group for some upcoming events. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Take care, Dan. Thanks,
Good
Cathy.
night, guys.
Take care,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a good one.
You too. Thank
Bye.